Robert Harrison had built his reputation on discipline and precision. At 47, the silver-haired CEO of Harrison Industries was known throughout the business world for his cool composure and exacting standards. His staff whispered that he could silence a boardroom with just a glance. His competitors said he had ice water in his veins. But what most people didn't know was that Robert had learned something important over the years. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the wisest one, and sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply pay attention. It was the company's annual Christmas gala. The grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel sparkled with golden lights and crystal chandeliers. A 12-foot tree stood in the center, decorated with cream and gold ornaments that caught the light like stars. The orchestra played holiday classics while 200 employees and their families mingled, laughed, and celebrated another successful year. Robert stood near the refreshment table, nursing a glass of water and observing the festivities. He'd given his speech earlier. Now he was simply watching his people enjoy themselves. That's when he noticed her. A little girl, perhaps 4 years old, stood near the dance floor. She wore a pale pink dress that matched her ballet flats, and she clutched a small stuffed rabbit against her chest. Her blonde hair was tied back with the satin ribbon, but it was her face that caught Robert's attention. Her eyes were squeezed shut, and her small hands were pressed firmly over her ears. The orchestra had just launched into a particularly energetic rendition of Jingle Bell Rock, and the volume had increased considerably. Robert's chest tightened. He'd seen that expression before, years ago, when his nephew was small, before anyone understood why loud noises made him retreat into himself, before they learned words like sensory processing and autism spectrum. Without thinking, Robert crossed the ballroom in long strides. He caught the conductor's eye and made a subtle gesture, lowering his hand slowly. The conductor, surprised but responsive, immediately signaled the orchestra. Within seconds, the music softened to a gentle background melody. The change was immediate. The little girl's shoulders relaxed slightly. Her hands lowered from her ears, though she kept them close, ready to cover again if needed. Robert knelt down a few feet away from her, careful not to intrude on her space. "That's better, isn't it?" he said quietly. "Sometimes things get a bit too loud at these parties." The girl opened her eyes and looked at him. She didn't speak, but she nodded, just barely. "I'm Robert," he said, staying where he was. "What's your name, Ma?" she whispered, so softly he almost missed it. "That's a beautiful name," Robert said, "and I see you brought a friend." He gestured to the stuffed rabbit. Emma looked down at her rabbit and held it up slightly. "This is Snowflake." "Hello, Snowflake," Robert said seriously, as if greeting another guest. "I'm glad you both could come to our party." A young woman emerged from the crowd, her face etched with worry and apology. She wore a light blue dress and had the same blonde hair as Emma. "Ma, sweetheart, there you are." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison," she said quickly. "I turned around for just a moment, and please," Robert said, standing but keeping his voice calm. "Don't apologize." "Is this your daughter?" "Yes, I'm Jennifer Matthews. I work in accounting." "I probably shouldn't have brought her, but my babysitter canceled at the last minute." "And you absolutely should have brought her," Robert interrupted gently. "This party is for families. That's the whole point." Jennifer looked uncertain, her hands nervously smoothing her dress. "It's just, Emma has autism, and sometimes these events can be overwhelming for her. The noise, the lights, all the people." "I understand," Robert said, and the way he said it, Jennifer could tell he really did. Emma tugged on her mother's dress. The music got quiet. "Mama." The man made it quiet. Jennifer looked at Robert with surprise and dawning understanding. You changed the music for Emma?" Robert shrugged, but there was warmth in his eyes. "The party's for everyone, isn't it? No reason it should be too loud for anyone to enjoy." He looked down at Emma again. "Is the music okay now?" Emma nodded, and for the first time, she smiled. "Just a little one, but it was there." "Good," Robert said. He paused, thinking, Ma, I have something in my office upstairs. Would you and your mom like to come see it? I think you might like it. Jennifer hesitated, but Emma's face had brightened with curiosity. What is it? It's a surprise, Robert said, but I promise it's quiet. They took the elevator to the executive floor. The hallway was empty and peaceful, far from the party noise below. Robert unlocked his office door and led them inside. His office was nothing like what Jennifer expected. Yes, there was the massive desk and the wall of windows overlooking the city, but there were also personal touches she hadn't anticipated. Photographs of family, a bookshelf filled with worn novels alongside business manuals, and on the credenza, a beautiful wooden music box. Robert walked over to it and lifted the lid carefully. Soft, delicate music began to play a gentle lullaby, nothing like the loud orchestra downstairs. Emma's eyes went wide. She walked closer, fascinated. My grandmother gave this to me when I was about your age, Robert said quietly. She said that music should make you feel peaceful, not scared. I've kept it all these years. Emma reached out tentatively, and Robert nodded his permission. She touched the smooth wood gently, as if it were made of glass. The tiny ballerina inside turned slowly, gracefully. It's pretty, Emma whispered. It is, isn't it? Robert agreed. He glanced at Jennifer, who was watching with tears in her eyes. Ma, being different isn't wrong. It just means you experience the world in your own way. That's actually pretty special. Jennifer's voice was thick with emotion. Mr. Harrison, I don't know what to say. This is. No one has ever. Robert held up a hand gently. When I was younger, I thought being strong meant never bending, never adjusting. But I've learned something over the years. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Real strength is noticing when someone needs something to change, and having the courage to change it. He knelt down beside Emma again. Do you know what I think makes a good party, Emma? She shook her head, still mesmerized by the music box. It's when everyone gets to enjoy it, not just the people who like it loud, not just the people who like to dance, everyone. He smiled. So thank you for teaching me something important tonight. What did I teach you? Emma asked, looking up at him with those wide, honest eyes that only children have. You taught me to listen better, to the quiet voices, too. They stayed in the office for a while longer, listening to the gentle melody of the music box. Robert showed Emma his collection of paperweights as she particularly loved the one with the winter scene inside. Jennifer gradually relaxed, the tension leaving her shoulders as she realized this wasn't reprimand or a burden. It was simply kindness. Eventually, they returned to the party. The music stayed at its softer volume for the rest of the evening. If anyone noticed the change, no one complained. In fact, several parents later mentioned how much more pleasant the atmosphere was, how they could actually talk to each other. Emma stayed close to her mother but no longer looked frightened. When dessert was served, Robert made sure a slice of chocolate cake found its way to her table. She didn't say much, but she waved at him once across the room, and that small gesture meant more to him than any business deal he'd closed that year. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Jennifer approached Robert one more time. Mr. Harrison, she said, I just want you to know. This meant everything, not just for Emma, but for me. You didn't have to do any of this. Robert shook his head. Jennifer, I've spent a lot of years climbing ladders and chasing goals, and somewhere along the way, I learned that success isn't just about what you build. It's about who you build it for, and whether you're paying attention to who needs what. He paused, his voice growing softer. My nephew is 17 now. When he was Emma's age, the world felt like a very harsh place for him. Too loud, too bright, too fast. People weren't always patient. They didn't always understand. He looked over at Emma, who was showing her rabbit to another child. I think about all the times someone could have made things easier for him, but didn't. All the times someone could have noticed, but looked away. You didn't look away tonight, Jennifer said quietly. No, Robert agreed. "And I don't intend to start. In fact, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we look at our company events differently. Make sure they're accessible for everyone. Better lighting options, quieter spaces available, clear communication about what to expect. Would you be willing to help me develop some guidelines?" Jennifer's face lit up with surprise and gratitude. "I would be honored." "Good. Come see me after the holidays, and we'll talk about it properly." He smiled. After all, we have an expert consultant now. He glanced at Emma. When the last guests had departed and the ballroom was empty, Robert stood alone for a moment, looking at the tree with its soft golden lights. The maintenance crew was beginning to clear tables, but they worked quietly, respectfully. His assistant, Margaret, who'd been with him for 15 years, approached. "That was something special you did tonight, Robert." "I just turned down the music, Margaret." "No," she said wisely. "You did much more than that. You noticed, you cared, and you did something about it." She patted his arm. "That's the man I've always known you to be, underneath all that CEO ice." Robert laughed softly. "Ice melts, Margaret, especially around people like Emma. Around people who remind us what really matters," she corrected. As Robert drove home that night through the quiet streets, he thought about Emma's small face when the music became soft enough to bear. He thought about Jennifer's grateful tears. He thought about his nephew, now nearly grown, who'd taught his family so much about patience and different kinds of strength. The cold CEO, they called him. The man who never bends. But bending wasn't weakness. Sometimes, bending was the strongest thing you could do. Adjusting your course when you saw someone struggling, turning down the volume when the world got too loud, making space for people who needed things to be a little different. That was real power. Not the kind that demanded attention, but the kind that paid it. The next morning, Robert returned to his office and looked at the music box on his credenza. He opened it, letting the soft melody fill the quiet room, and he smiled, remembering a little girl with a stuffed rabbit, who'd reminded him what truly mattered. Kindness doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers. Sometimes, it's as simple as turning down the music and saying, "Is that better now?" And sometimes, that's everything. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in being unmovable, but in knowing exactly when and how to bend. Real power lies not in making others adjust to us, but in adjusting the world so everyone can find their place in it.